This Feeling by LeilahMoon. Read by Ella Max Mabella. Chapter 22. She hadn't spent much time setting up the room of requirement to meet Draco that evening. All Hermione wanted was to get some explanation from him before they had to leave the castle for the holidays. "What were you doing, roaming the corridors the other evening? I know for a fact you didn't actually want to gatecrash Slughorn's party." "I was working on a task. You know I'm not going to tell you more than that." "Draco," she pleaded, "you promised to keep me involved." He clutched her shoulders and, looking into her bright eyes, willed her to understand. "You already know too much. The less you know, the better." Draco sighed and pulled her into a tight hug. "And when things go wrong, you won't have to feel the guilt." Hermione knew he was talking about Katie Bell. "Do you want to?" "No, I don't." It took everything she had not to push him farther. She wasn't sure if it was doing more harm than good by her avoiding the subject, but she just couldn't look into his gaunt face and ask more questions. "Harry overheard your conversation with Snape," she told him. "Fucking Potter, always sticking his nose in where it isn't wanted." Hermione glowered but continued. "He said that Snape wants to help you, Draco, that he made the unbreakable vow with your mother. Why on earth are you not taking advantage of that?" He rubbed his eyes tiredly. "I don't trust him." "Fine, you don't trust him, but—" She paused. "I know you shot me down on this before, but I still think going to Dumbledore might be our best option." No, Granger, don't you get it? I can't risk my parents' lives, my mother's life, on the whims of a teacher." "Draco," she swallowed, gazing into his eyes. She loved him so much. "You're not really planning on actually killing him, are you?" There was a beat of silence. No, of course not." And what could she say to that? Tucked beneath his arm, she sighed. "I wish we never had to leave this room." Draco tightened his grip on her. "I know, and the amount of times I've thought about kidnapping you and running away to some remote island is getting silly." She smiled weakly and tried to relax her permanently tensed muscles. "I've got your Christmas present with me, by the way." "Gimme," he said, poking her ribs. Hermione knew he was trying a little too hard to be playful for her sake, but she allowed it. She pulled a box from her satchel and handed it to him. Lying inside were 2 simple silver rings. "Are you proposing to me, Granger?" Draco smirked his first for a long time. "Shouldn't you be on one knee?" "You wish," she huffed. "No, I've charmed them so we can keep in contact more easily. You can transfigure one band to send a short message to the other, and it will heat up as an alert." He ran one of his slender fingers over the larger ring. "That's amazing," he murmured. Hermione slipped her ring on, and tapping her wand to the metal, indicated for Draco to wear his and one. The band warmed, and 3 letters emerged. I-L-Y. "I-L-Y?" he asked in confusion. She laughed and handed him a small, square package. "Here's your second present, a Muggle book and taxing abbreviations." "I literally have no idea what you're talking about." "You'll get there," she said, enjoying the way her face stretched when she smiled. "So, where's my present?" "It's not much," he muttered, handing her a box similar in size to the one she gave him. Hermione gasped. Draco was wrong. It was one of the most beautiful pieces of jewelry she had ever seen. Despite knowing that he was staying at Hogwarts over the Christmas holidays, Hermione couldn't help but worry about Draco. The only thing that prevented her from having a complete breakdown was the connection they shared through their rings. This, however, quickly turned into the bane of her life. There were moments where she sorely regretted gifting him the joke Muggle book. It was only on the first day of January term, however, when she received a series of symbols that looked suspiciously like a penis, that she seriously considered hexing him across the Great Hall. Dragging herself away from inappropriate ring messages, she turned back into Harry, confiding in her and Ron about his lessons with Dumbledore and the memory he needed to retrieve from Slughorn. Ron thought that Harry was unlikely to have any trouble with Slughorn at all. "He loves you," he said over breakfast, waving an airy forkful of fried egg. "Won't refuse you anything, will? Just hang back after class this afternoon and ask him." Hermione, however, took a gloomier view. "He must be determined to hide what really happened if Dumbledore couldn't get it out of him," she said in a low voice. Horcruxes. I've never heard of them." Harry was disappointed. He had hoped that Hermione might have been able to give him a clue as to what Horcruxes were. "They must be really advanced dark magic, or why would Voldemort have wanted to know about them? I think it's going to be difficult to get the information, Harry. You'll have to be very careful about how you approach Slughorn. Think out a strategy. Chapter 23. February moved towards March with no change in the weather except that it became windy as well as wet. Hermione was angrily pacing the corridor outside the room of hidden things, her fists clenched tightly. She was exhausted, having spent most of the night with Ron in the hospital wing, and felt as though her heart had been torn in two. Once Crabbe and Goyle had been scared off, she started banging furiously on the locked door. To her surprise, it opened quickly, and she almost fell to the floor. Draco caught her and pulled her inside. "What are you doing here?" he asked irritably. Hermione took a step towards him and slammed her hands against his chest. He stumbled backwards, staring at her incredulously. "It was you, wasn't it, Malfoy?" "What?" he cried. She took another step forward, and he held up his hands in surrender. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the poisoned mead." Draco blanched. Panic flashed through his eyes. How do you know about that?" Her voice was cold as she replied, "You are the reason that Ron is in the hospital wing right now. He almost died." He reached out to touch her, but she stopped him. "Don't!" "Hermione, I'm so sorry, I didn't know." "No, but you knew someone was going to drink it. That was the whole point, I imagine." He hung his head, unsure of what to tell her. She continued, "I didn't say anything about Katie Bell because you already looked so broken, and I thought it must have been an accident. You couldn't really have meant to hurt her or anyone else. Clearly, I was mistaken." Draco could feel his anger rising. The barely contained rage was itching to be let loose. "Why can't you understand that I don't have a choice?" "We could have gone to Dumbledore Snape even. Surely that would have been better than these ill-conceived plans. They could have hidden you and your parents, protected you, kept you all away from this." He clenched his jaw. "I've told you before, I don't trust him." "Nor me, it seems," Hermione said quietly. "Please, let me help you. Maybe we can come up with something else." There were at least 100 thoughts running through his head, fighting to be the one spoken aloud. He wanted to hold her and say, "Yes, okay, yes, I need you. I can't do this without you. It's going to be hard, but maybe there's another way." Instead, all he said was, "No." The silence that followed was deafening. "This is too much. I can't do this right now," Hermione whispered finally, tears rolling freely down her cheeks. I know how hard your life is at the moment, Draco. But all you've done is push me away, and now you've almost killed 2 students, one of which being my best friend." She made to walk away from him, but he caught her sleeve. "Please, Hermione," he begged. "Please." It shocked her, the way he looked in that moment, his red-rimmed eyes pleading silently with her to understand. She had never seen him look so vulnerable, and it almost stopped her from reaching for the door handle. Almost, but not quite. Hermione shook her head and left. He stood in the 6th-floor boys' bathroom, hands clenching one of the cold porcelain skins. His white blonde head bowed. Draco's eyes burned with tears. He hated to cry, detested any show of weakness, but he was powerless to control it. Draco slammed his hand viciously against the wall. He couldn't take it anymore. Everything was falling apart. He was a useless waste of space who wasn't even able to get 2 items delivered to the right person, let alone fix a fucking cabinet. And the one person he thought was on his side couldn't stand him. With good reason. "Don't!" cried Mourning Myrtle's voice from one of the other cubicles. "Don't tell me what's wrong. I can help you." "No one can help me," Draco replied hoarsely. His whole body was shaken. "I can't do it. I can't. It won't work, and unless I do it soon, he says he'll kill me after he's killed my mother." The tears began streaming in earnest, leaving red-hot tracks down his pale face. He swiped at them furiously. Draco gasped and gulped, and then, with a great shudder, looked up into the cracked mirror and saw Potter staring at him over his shoulder. Draco whirled around instinctively, drawing his wand, and Potter pulled out his own. His hex missed Hermione's friend by inches, shattering the lamp on the wall beside him. Potter threw himself sideways and flicked his wand, but Draco blocked the jinx and raised his wand for another. No, stop it!" yelled Moaning Myrtle, her voice echoing loudly around the tilted room. "Stop!" There was a loud bang, and the bin behind Potter exploded. He attempted a leg locker curse that backfired off the wall behind Draco's ear and smashed a cistern beneath Myrtle, who screamed. Water poured everywhere, and Potter slipped over as Draco, his face contorted in rage, screamed, "Crucio, sectum sempra!" bellowed Potter from the floor, waving his wand wildly. Blood spurted from Draco's face and chest as though he had been slashed with an invisible sword. He staggered backwards and collapsed onto the waterlogged floor with a crack, his wand falling from his limp right hand. "No!" gasped Potter. Slipping and sliding, Harry got to his feet and plunged towards Draco, whose face was now shining scarlet, his white hands scrabbling at his blood-soaked chest. Draco wasn't fully aware of what happened next. All he could think about was how, for a moment, he had genuinely hoped that Potter would kill him, save him the trouble of having to live this cursed life for a moment longer. But now that it was coming true, he only wanted to live. He needed to live. For his mother, for Hermione. As he was lifted into the air, he grasped at the ring she had given him and held onto it as tightly as he could. To be continued. Thank you for listening to this chapter of This Feeling by LeilahMoon, read by LeilahMoon. If you would like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, AO3.